No, I mean, I have seen some people, posting jobs with numbers that I didn't even believe them, to be honest.
What's up, guys? Coding Jesus here. Guys, in today's video, I'm going to be interviewing Jeremy Lucid. Jeremy is a software engineer in the world of quantitative trading, and he comes from a very unique background in the sense that he codes in a programming language that is very niche and very, very lucrative in the world of quantitative trading. The full uncut interview is available on my Patreon, and the distilled version is here for your enjoyment. I hope you guys like it. Hello, everybody. Coding Jesus here. Today, I have the pleasure of speaking with Jeremy Lucid. He is a KDB Plus developer from Ireland who has over 10 years of experience building KDB systems for clients in the financial industry, such as Liquidnet, HSBC, and the CME. His projects covered a variety of topics, including transaction cost analysis, best execution, and market surveillance. He also has a PhD in computational physics and a Master's of Science with a focus in high performance computing. Welcome, Jeremy.
Thanks very much.
Awesome. Well, a lot of my viewers are going to be interested in the world of quantitative finance, quant trading in general. And I think I really wanted to interview you in particular because you have a lot of experience in the field and in a very niche programming language called Q slash KDB, or people usually just call it KDB. Can you tell us what KDB is and what is a KDB plus developer?
Yeah, sure. So KDB, the high level title for KDB is it's a high performance time series database that's very memory efficient. And so it's a database which is the go-to database for many large firms in the financial services industry. And it has been for almost 20 years now. So what it's done over those 20 years is it's built up a lot of trust. So obviously you have to have the speed, or these
Mm-hmm.
big clients are not going to use your software. But the main thing is the trust that's been built up over that long period of time. They've proven that they've been able to scale. They've proven that they can do the kind of they can scale with the large data volumes that are coming from these exchanges. So I know recently you did a video on order book data,
Right.
the different levels of the order book. So that's the kind of information. When I'm talking about the big data problems in finance, the amount of data that they're actually recording, it's all coming from trades, top of book messages, order book, different levels of the order book. And these big financial firms, they got a problem because they need to download all of this information. They need to
Mm-hmm.
analyze it to understand the market as best they can. And they need the best time series database solution for that.
Mm.
So again, KDB got in there early and it proved its worth in the early days. And working in that financial service industry, it's like a pressure cooker. They've got very high expectations, very high standards, and if your software is meeting those standards, you're going to hear about it pretty fast. So the whole language grew up in this environment where there was high frequency trading, lots of data. The business wanted real time analysis, end of day reporting, all of this stuff. And it managed to actually satisfy their needs. And as a result, now people trust it. So it's like, this phrase, a strong wind makes for strong trees. So KDB kind of optimized, towards everything was geared towards high performance. So that's what you get, at the end of 20 years. And that's why I think it's kind of solidified its place today in the world of finance. So I can explain a little bit about what a KDB Plus developer actually does.
We're going to get to the KDB Plus developer part in a second, but before we get there,
Mm,
oftentimes people talk about a KDB Plus developer in the context of Q slash KDB. So
exactly, yeah.
can you differentiate what Q is and how it's different from KDB and why it's kind of placed together?
Oh, yeah. So Q is the native programming language that's within KDB. So it's an array programming language. It's interpreted, so it's a bit like Python. It's also dynamic, which means you can change the names, the types of variables. You can override functions. Whereas KDB is usually when you're speaking about the entire framework, the database, the file system, the whole storage, the whole storage layer, all of the applications that kind of typically make up a KDB installment. So you'd be talking about real-time databases, historical databases, gateway layers to retrieve information from different sources. So that's generally what you talk about when you're referring to KDB. It's kind of the whole solution. Q is purely just the native programming language.
Got it. That makes sense. Okay. Well, jumping back on track then, what is a KDB Plus developer?
Yeah, so the main role of a KDB Plus developer, their first job is to set up the infrastructure so that you can receive the market data. Now, the market data might be coming from a feed handler. It could be Fix, it could be Fix messages, it could be WebSocket, it could be messages coming directly from the trading engine. So imagine you're setting up a trading engine. Obviously, you're sending order messages to the exchange. You're getting back execution reports. You're sending cancel messages, cancel replace. You're also getting back market data messages, top of book, order book, as I said. So all of that information needs to go somewhere so that you can actually have an audit trail of exactly what happened. So when it comes to understanding how your strategy actually worked, did it do the right thing? Did something break? Was the price feed good? What are the latencies? All that. You need to have a strong database, obviously, for recording that information. So the first thing KDB does is it ingests the data quickly. It's known for fast ingestion, then storing the data, persisting it down to disk. Many clients require it to be compressed or to even be encrypted if needs be. Then you would also store the data in real-time, in-memory processes, so real-time database. And that would usually be used for, let's say, dashboard queries. So you've got users logging in, they want to see their trades, their orders. So typically that information, you would hold it in memory so that it can be retrieved much faster. And so the KDB developer's main responsibility is to set up that infrastructure initially for the consumption of data. Make sure everything has been saved down, set up your schemas, sort the data on disk so that it's optimal for the queries. And then the next step would be setting up the real-time analytics. So that's where the KDB developer actually comes along and works with the quants. Because of course, KDB developers, we have an idea at this point, the kind of analytics you need, but really we look to the quants, the business team, what you really want me to calculate. And well, I have a good example of that. My first interaction with a quant was actually when we were developing analytics for best execution. So again, best execution, I'm sure you've covered it before. It's all about just determining if your client got good value for money. Was the price competitive? Or were there better prices on other exchanges? Should it have been routed elsewhere? What was the traded price versus the top of book at the time? So this was back at HSBC, actually. The first day I was told, you need to go downstairs to the trading desk to meet the quant, because he had written up the entire specification, which was pretty heavy on the math. He was trying to explain it to me. But so he had, first of all, come up with the theory, what do we need to actually measure? And second, he had actually written the Q code to perform best execution on a sample day of production data. And so I worked with him to then productionize it. So he used Q to examine the data, to prototype his function using the Q programming language, to develop the metrics. And then my job was to productionize it, turn it into a real-time system where we can run it every 30 seconds on all the trades, and then we can set off alerts if something went wrong.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
That makes sense. That sounds a lot like what I would think of the role of a traditional quantitative developer. And we'll get to kind of the differences between a KDB Plus developer and a quantitative developer later. I'm also curious about what made you decide to pursue KDB Plus. Now, I know KDB is developed by KX Systems, which I believe is headquartered in Ireland, and you're
Correct.
also from Ireland, so I'm assuming there was some geographical influence there. But beyond that, why do you decide to become a KDB Plus developer?
So I had actually started out, as you mentioned there, I did a lot of physics actually when I was in university in mathematics. But when I'd come to the end of that, I'd spent maybe 9 or 10 years in university. I had built up a lot of skills in the programming world, software development, and I actually felt that, that the physics, it's too much for me. My level of mathematics, it was okay, but it wasn't. You have to be high level, to really pursue physics as a career. So I needed to play to my own strengths, find my own level, so to speak. And I enjoyed the programming more, to be honest. And you're right about the geographical link. That's right. So there is First Derivatives was not too far from me, the headquarters. So it was a short drive up, and a friend of mine actually recommended it. He had been working with KDB for a while, so I decided to apply, and I enjoyed it. Yeah. So
Do you mind just explaining what First Derivatives is to people that aren't familiar?
yeah, so First Derivatives, they actually bought KX Systems, who are today they're the kind of maintainers of KDB Plus. They actually renamed themselves recently to FD Technologies. So they are mainly a consultancy business. So a lot of the KDB developers, especially that came out of Ireland, went through First Derivatives at that time. That's where the main training program was actually for KDB.
For those that aren't familiar with Q, they've never seen it. How does it compare to other programming languages like C++ or Python? Like, what are its selling points, maybe its weaknesses? How
Yeah,
would you
yeah.
describe that?
Q is a very unique beast, to be honest. So it's an array programming language, which means it's designed for performing operations on large vectors, which works very well for time series data because you're dealing with columns, more than most often. For example, if you're computing a VWAP, obviously you've got your price column, you've got your size column, your quantity column. So that's one aspect of it. That's array programming language. The second is that it's interpreted, so it's not compiled like C++. So it would be more Python-like. And of course, people that use Python, they're very familiar with the REPL. When you start up your Q prompt, you've got a read, evaluate, print loop, and you've got the same thing in Q. Looks like this. You've got this little Q prompt. Here's a book as well. You've got the same book. Fantastic. Yeah.
Yeah, I remember reading it like years ago. It was a great book, but yeah.
Keep it near. Keep it near. Keep it by your desk. So yeah, so it's an interpreted program, and the great thing about having a REPL is that it makes it very easy, especially in KDB, to read in the data from different sources, to load the data from disk, to have in-memory data, to manipulate tables, to carry out joins. And the real benefit, I spend most of my time just on the REPL prototyping functions.
So let's talk about, I mean, you mentioned at the very beginning, you mentioned, market data, order execution. In the world of financial, or in the world of traditional finance,
Mhm.
where do you see it being most impactful?
Most impactful, I would say, is it's a tough question. There's so many areas. There's the ability to, of course, the query ability, the reading from disk, having in-memory database is just a super advantage. You can have caching mechanisms as well to speed up queries. That's quite beautiful. Then you have the whole streaming as well, the ability to stream data to downstream services. So you might have your ticket plan process, which is the main process in KDB that typically receives data from feed handlers, and then it would publish it downstream to different subscribers. A subscriber might be a process that runs minute bars, so a service that gives you out high and low every 10 minutes, the volume traded, and so on, different things like that. So the streaming event processing is very powerful at that as well, I would say. And because you have the Q kind of general programming language, it really expands the range of applications that you can actually create from Q. Because I've seen, even trading platforms being built in Q as well, thanks to the kind of ability for inter-process communication and all of the in-memory calculations that could be performed. It's also huge in the world of reporting. Everywhere I've worked, there's been either internal reports that need to run at the end of the day or the end of the month, or there could be regulatory reporting. There's this RTS report, so usually KDB is involved in that as well. So report generation, that's also another big area that it's used in.
What does kind of a day in the life look like? What are the typical day like? What kind of tasks do you handle? What sort of divisions do you work with? At the beginning, you mentioned you worked with a quant researcher. What does that day in the life look like?
Okay, yes. So my first task in the morning, I always check the end of day jobs to make sure everything ran okay. I check the processes, ensure they're all up. Usually there's alerts that go off, but it's good to kind of double check. Um, then most of my time is actually spent developing dashboards. So the UI, the front end, whatever the business want, anything, new metrics that need to be added, new views.
And is
I
that
actually,
dashboard written using the KDB suite, or is it written in some other language?
yeah, so we've explored a couple of different options. We've used KX dashboards, which is the one that KX built. That's kind of designed purely for KDB, and that's probably one of the best ones to go with, I would say. But then, because we have other databases as well, other services, we also use Grafana, and there's an API for Grafana built by a group called Data Intellect. And there's another good one that's come out recently called Pulse as well, by a group called Time Stored, not related to Richard Hart and the Pulse chain system. Um, so yeah, I spend a lot of time doing the UI development, not necessarily doing JavaScript and so on, but mainly just setting up the queries in the back end to make sure they're running as quickly as possible, streaming data as well, as opposed to kind of ad hoc queries. We do a lot of that. Then database optimization as well, database maintenance. And I try to get it stuck in as much as I can into actually working with the guys to figure out what do we actually need to measure, what's actually most valuable, because I can be writing queries all day, developing dashboards all day, but the most important thing is, what are you actually trying to measure? You can waste a lot of time actually developing dashboards that people don't use. It's very important that everyone agrees the value on the data, from day one. So I'm mainly, to summarize, I'm mainly focused on database optimization, the queries, populating dashboards, and also kind of enriching our end of day reports. We do a lot of end of day reporting and intraday reporting.
And I'm sure there's lots of like aggregation and computation and calculation that goes into that end of day reporting. It's not just getting a number from somewhere, from some WebSocket or from feed handler and kind of forwarding it through KDB.
Exactly. Yeah. It's, performing aggregations. Let's say if you're a market maker, you'd be calculating the total fees that you paid for the day, the profit and loss, your total buy, total sell quantity, your percentage of the market, all of these interesting things that can tell you basically about how well you're doing, relatively speaking. Yeah.
That makes sense. That makes sense. How does the role then differ from a traditional software engineer or quantitative developer? Because, hearing you speak, it sounds like a lot of kind of the traditional tasks you'd hear that a software engineer would be given, except you're not a C++ software engineer or a Python software engineer, you're a KDB plus software engineer. Is that analysis correct, or are there larger differences that I'm not picking up on or not familiar with?
No, it's definitely true that the KDB developer does like a very wide variety of roles, but I would think, often when I think of the quantitative developer, I think they're more focused on um, basically the mathematical modeling, the statistics, trying to understand the market features, market dynamics, the microstructure, things like that. So I guess they'd be more coming from that side of things, whereas the KDB developer is more implementing what they need to kind of help them. I would say, but maybe there is a larger overlap actually between the two.
I see. So you'd say you're closer to the traditional software engineer than the quantitative developer, but still there's like shared areas of
There's
commonality.
definitely shared areas. Yeah.
Okay. Let's talk numbers because a lot of people, we can talk about KDB Plus for days, but they want to know how much money can a KDB Plus developer expect to make at various seniorities. I also know that there's not just seniorities, there's also, um, I guess, various roles in the sense that you can be a KDB Plus consultant, or you can be a KDB Plus developer for a consultant company, a
Correct.
consultancy company, which is different than being a KDB Plus developer for the bank itself that's hiring the consultancy company. So what does that compensation structure look like? How much money can people expect to make?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah. Well, let's start with, let's say you work for a consultancy, right, which I did for many years. Then, of course, they're taking some of the cream off the top, so to speak. Okay. And also, you might not get the same level of bonuses as you would if you worked for the company directly, for the client directly. But most people do start out in consultancies because it's hard to go out on your own right from the beginning. But I think if you're looking for numbers in dollar terms, I guess you could start off maybe 60 to $80,000, probably close to an entry level quant, more or less. And then as you go up, as you become a senior quant, I was actually just looking at these numbers today on a nice website called kdbplusjobs.com.
And I'll put that link in the description box.
We'll give the link in the description. And there you can actually see they do a breakdown of, first of all, who is actually hiring KDB developers, which is good. But then they also give a breakdown of the pay by country. Okay. So you can see that actually depending on where you're living, United Kingdom, United States, Singapore, those are kind of like the best regions. So they give it to that level of granularity, but I don't think they really break it down into the levels of seniority. But let's say you start at, say, 60 to 80,000, then I would say within 4 to 5 years, you should be definitely over the 100 to 120,000 mark. And then you can possibly go beyond that as well, becoming a more senior developer. And also, depending on where you're working, you could also get the bonuses. If you're working for, especially in the US, I know they definitely do a lot more bonuses over there. They're a little bit more generous as well, I think. So you also have that. So I think it's the whole range of maybe 60 to 80,000 up to maybe 180. You could crack the 200 mark as well. I'm sure some people are even above that.
Yeah, in the US in particular, every KDB Plus developer that I know that's senior is making money hand over fist because a lot of banks have a very large need for Q and KDB Plus developers, and there's just so few of them. There's a shortage of KDB Plus developers in kind of the more senior echelons. So, I wouldn't doubt it if somebody told me they're making 300, 400, maybe even more than that all-in compensation as a senior level QKDB Plus developer that has like a name for his or herself in the industry, at a big bank or at some large trading firm. Does that correlate
Well,
with your
no,
understanding?
it is because it's all down to supply and demand, essentially. There's a huge demand for it, but there's not many people that specialize in it. Hence, I think it's a good tool to have in your kit because, potentially it could help, increase your pay salary as well, your compensation. That's, just having those skills.
Yeah, it seems like while I guess I can put it this way, while the compensation of like a traditional software engineer is maybe a little more linear, I find that KDB Plus developers is kind of like more quadratic in the sense that it starts off a little lower potentially, but as you grow in seniority and in knowledge, that kind of like really sharply increases, surpassing, I guess you can say, traditional C++ or Python software engineer. That is at
Hmm.
least my understanding based off the people that I've spoken to, and
Yeah.
that's does that resonate with you as well?
Yeah, it is. No, I mean, I have seen some people, posting jobs with numbers that I didn't even believe them, to be honest, at the time.
Yeah.
Maybe it's true. Yeah, no, definitely. I think working for still some of these big players, J.P. Morgan, Morgan Stanley, those could probably get there.
Yep. And so, you mentioned just now that if it's KDB Plus is part of your toolkit, it can help you obviously, grow your career. How has specializing in KDB impacted your career? Did it help you stand out for some roles? Did it impact your ability to compete in others? Do you like it? Do you regret it? I mean, how do you feel?
Well, yeah, it very much narrowed my career, I would say, because once I specialized in it, I spent a lot of time, working from different clients. And then you build up more and more experience. It becomes a bit easier. Then you get promoted to another job, maybe more responsibility. It gets harder to get out, to be honest. And I always believed when I was younger that it's best to kind of diversify, to have a wide range of skills. Sometimes just specializing in one thing, which is in high demand, is also a good strategy. You know. Um,
Yep, that makes sense. I mean, when I was leaving BitMEX, I really wanted to potentially pursue a role in Q and KDB Plus, but I shortly realized that if that's the route I want to go, I'd kind of be pigeonholed into that if that's the only language that I know. So that's why I decided to learn C++ and C Sharp, and maybe one day I'll be doing KDB again. But I definitely, what you're saying definitely makes sense to me.
Exactly. And I suppose the other benefit was it gave me the opportunity to do a lot of travel. So, I've spent a little bit of time in New York and London and so on. So, and I even went out to the UAE as well. I was working with the regulator there for a while on market surveillance. So, yeah, that, it's good to get that bit of travel in as well.
Awesome. Yeah, I definitely haven't been to those parts of the world. That's very cool.
Hmm.
Last two things. The first thing I want to ask is where you see KDB Plus going in the future. Because if somebody's watching this video and they're saying, maybe I want to be a KDB Plus developer, but I'm not too sure about the future of KDB Plus in particular, given that it's developed by a private company, not some open collective, where do you see it going in the next few years?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question, and that's something that I think about a lot as well. Um, I know that currently they're pushing to expand into the world of AI, so they have this database technology called KDB.ai, which is like a vector database. So they're trying to push that a lot. So that's a new avenue for them to pursue. They're also changing the license at the moment, from what I hear. I don't have the full details on it yet, but I'm hoping that those changes to the license fee in particular, will make it more attractive to smaller to medium-sized businesses. Because I am convinced there's a lot of businesses out there, especially in finance and other areas, who like KDB. They know that it can help them, but they just don't have the budget currently because they're too small to use it. The main positive is that they have earned their position in finance currently. It's a solid base for TradFi to build their applications on top of. They just need to build on that, I think, and hopefully with the license changes, new innovative technologies like KDB.ai, building on all the hard work they've already done. Um, that there's a bright future, I would hope.
Okay. Um, and so finally, I guess for the viewer watching this, it says, okay, what are the next steps for me if I'm interested in maybe learning some Q on the side to kind of fluff in my resume, maybe see if I can add modules in Q or projects in Q to my current suite of programming languages and projects. What are some resources for them to go and learn? Personally, I think when I was learning, there was a resource called like Q for Gods or something, if I remember it correctly. Yeah, where can people go to learn more?
Yeah, very good. Q for gods. So I
Or no,
would
Q for
suggest,
Mortals or something, something along
yeah,
those lines.
correct. Q for mortals is version 1. So
Okay. Okay.
start with Q for mortals and work your way up to Q for gods.
Okay.
So what I would say is start by downloading the personal version. Install that on your Linux, your Mac environment, whatever it may be, and start using the Q interactive session, okay, the REPL environment. And start with maybe Q for Mortals. Go online. That's an online book. It's free. And just work through the examples there. And mainly focus on just the QSQL part, I would say, initially, because that's the kind of easiest to understand, I find. Another way you could come at learning Q is actually through Python. I was listening to a guy talking about this recently where, there's this project called PyKX. So if you have Python, the Python interpreter, you can actually have Q in your Python interpreter. It's quite amazing. So that's another way to actually come at learning Q. So the import Q, or you can use Q via Python to increase your Python programs, actually, to increase the speed and performance. And it also allows you to leverage all those great machine learning libraries that are already in Python. So that's another way to do it. And then eventually you can get back to the books, the more high-level books. But, I think with Q, it's all just about consistency with anything, I guess. Put in 10, 20 minutes a day. just take your time learning it, and it's just all about consistency, really. And yes, that's what I'd say.
And then applying that knowledge to various projects that you find meaningful and that you'll use.
Exactly, yeah. And when you're applying for a job as well, a lot of the quant, you know, a lot of the resumes that I see for quants, they all mention KDB, and of course on the job post as well, they say KDB and Q is a nice to have, if you have that skill. And I would say that don't lie in your resume.
Right.
If you've only done the course online that KX provides, I should say that's another resource. There's online tutorials on kx.com. You can do a course, get a certificate. If that's all you've done, just say that's all you've done, and that should be enough. Don't stretch it.
Yep. That
Yeah.
makes sense. Well, thank you for your time, Jeremy. You're very generous in providing me with, I think it's almost an hour now of your time. For those of you that want to become more familiar with Q and KDB Plus, I'll put links into the description box below. Jeremy, I'll probably also put a link to your LinkedIn in the description box below if you'd like. We can speak about that later. But yeah, thank you so much for your time, and I appreciate you coming and speaking to me and the audience.
Absolutely. Thanks very much. It was a pleasure.
No problem.
Talk to you soon.
Talk to you soon.